This is Set Him Free, Chapter 8. No way. I am not doing this. Virgil, careful with your words. Janice offered a warning tone, keeping his eyes locked on the angered thief. Don't tell me what to be careful about. There is no way in heck that I'm getting stuck with babysitting duty. Oh, what's the matter, Virgie? Is the itsy-bitsy spider mad that he doesn't get to handle the thievery anymore? Remus taunted, flashing a wicked grin. You don't get to say anything about this, Virgil barked. And you, he raised an accusatory finger to Janice, are out of your mind if you think I'm going to spend as much as a few minutes around him. Janice sighed, scribbling a few notes upon a piece of paper and handing it to Remus, who giddily waved it in Virgil's face. He snarled back, causing Remus's grin to grow wider. That only increased Virgil's frustration, and he expectantly glowered at Janice. The latter only shrugged. You know this is for your own safety, Virgil. Seeming as you are a wanted criminal, the kingdom would most likely be scouting for you throughout the towns. It is best that you don't show your face within the city to avoid recognition. Simple precautions. Since when are you one for precautions? We literally just kidnapped a prince. A prince as in royalty. Has this not registered within either of your minds? It most certainly has, which is exactly why Remus will be performing our daily tasks. Would you rather be caught on the streets, now swarming with guards and imprisoned for multiple counts of thievery, as well as a suspect within a known capture? Virgil sighed, glaring daggers at Janice. If looks could kill, the whole kingdom would be dead by this point. He sighed, tightly opening and closing his fists. Fine. I'll watch Roman, though you owe me for this. Janice smiled, clasping his hands together and spinning on his heels. Good. Thank you, Virgil. I resent you, Virgil grumbled as he slunk towards the main corridor. Not so bad yourself, Janice called back, and as much as Virgil wanted to be angry, the corners of his mouth turned up at the remark. He was right. If Virgil were to enter the streets right now, nothing good could come of it. Still, he hated to allow Remus, of all people, to do his job for him. Each task would be done just fine, but the line of chaos that followed, though laughable, was never fun to clean up. Not to mention that, while all of this was occurring, Virgil would be stuck watching over Roman, of all people. Nothing about this was fair. The locked door lay at the very end of the hall. A dark iron latch kept fastened just above the door handle. Virgil inserted the key, dropping the now open lock onto the wooden floor with a dull thud. He pulled the door open. Roman remained tied to the chair in the center of the room, seemingly asleep. Virgil glanced around the room. There were no other seats besides the one that the prince occupied. A minute smile crept onto Virgil's lips as he took notice of this, turning to face the shelves that lined the side wall. Shifting his weight onto his back leg, Virgil vaulted upwards, coming to settle on top of the shelf. A leather satchel also occupied the space, appearing as if it had been tossed there recently, and leaving Virgil curious. He reached for it, though was interrupted due to the cloud of dust that was now floating from the shelf. It teased his nose, which led him to undergo an unpleasant coughing fit, one apparently loud enough to wake the other presence within the room. Roman startled, eyes frantically darting around the room. The sudden alarm had caused him to jolt awake, leaving him wincing from the coarse ropes that had scraped against his skin. His breathing was somewhat shaky, each breath sounding like it took an extra bout of effort. Though Virgil knew that the prince had not been greatly harmed, he could tell that he was in pain. And just like that, Roman's eyes settled on him, his expression hardening. Any previous ounce of distress had disappeared, hostility replacing it all. "How long have you been sitting up there?" he asked. "About a minute. Why? Did I disturb your precious beauty sleep?" Roman scowled, though kept his mouth shut. "I guess you're the only one who can ask questions then, huh? Good to know that despite being a prisoner, you still believe you're in control." "I don't need to answer anything from you," Roman spat. "And why is that?" Virgil bit back. "Because you're the prince? Because you always get your way?" "No," Roman seethed. "Because you're a villain, one who has committed treason and deserves no ounce of my respect." Virgil jumped down from the shelf. "I'm going to let you in on one little secret," he hissed, Roman drawing back slightly. "I don't know what Janice wants from you, and I don't honestly care. But if you think for 1 second that I will tolerate your loathsome bravado, then you are greatly mistaken." Roman's eyes narrowed, though he did not retort. He wasn't going to give Virgil the satisfaction. He watched as the thief again ascended the shelf, retrieving something from the top. The object came into his view, and Roman sucked in a breath. Virgil's gaze trailed down to him, then back to the satchel now within his hands. Still keeping his eyes trained on Roman, Virgil lifted the leather flap, flashing a defiant smile much to the prince's discontent. He began emptying contents from the bag, eyebrows raising excitedly as if everything was nothing other than a light-hearted game. Much to Roman's misfortune, it was quite the opposite. Roman watched as Virgil removed a series of pencils from his bag, a slight look of disappointment crossing the thief's face. Roman frowned, but did gain a spark of victory at the thief's underwhelmed reaction. Now bored, Virgil tossed the pencils from the shelf, one of which bounced off the prince's head, arousing a smirk from Virgil. He again reached into the bag and pulled out a set of iron shackles, immediately dropping them to the floor with a heavy clank. This seemed to leave him slightly troubled, but his curiosity took over once more. The next thing to emerge from the satchel was a folded slip of paper. Roman recognized it immediately, flooded with the memories of everything he had been taken from just a few days ago. Virgil, however, glanced at it with unwavering uncertainty. Roman watched his eyes scan the letters on the page, as if he had to read it multiple times to comprehend what had been written on it. Finally, he raised the parchment to face Roman. "Where did you get this?" he said, the phrase sounding more like a demand than a question. "Recovered from the castle gates." Virgil's brow creased, and he took another peek down at the sheet, the same one that had detailed the blacksmith robbery and led to Roman's capture. Pursing his lips, Virgil refolded the paper, then tucked it into the folds of his cloak. He didn't utter anything else about the item. Returning to focus, Virgil pulled a silver dagger from the bag. "Careful!" Roman shouted before he could stop himself. Virgil glanced his way with sudden interest. The prince felt his heart sink. That was my father's dagger," Roman explained. He caught a flash of something within Virgil's eyes. Maybe it was pity or even a concealed sympathy. But moments later, Virgil was sliding the dagger back into the satchel. Roman wasn't sure what to think of it. The thief could have simply ignored Roman's sudden request and used it as a tool for manipulation. But he hadn't. The satchel was returned to rest on the shelf as Virgil jumped to the floor with a thud. Crossing the room, he rested his hand on the door handle. "I'll be right back. Don't try anything." Like I really have the choice, Roman retorted. Virgil opened his mouth as if to snap something back, though stopped and shot Roman a glare instead. He slipped through the doorway, slamming the door much harder than necessary behind him. As soon as he registered the latching of the door, Roman shifted his mind into focus. There had to be some way to slip free of the ropes that currently held him bound to this gosh-forsaken chair. Roman strained for a glimpse behind his shoulder. The ropes were impossible to untie by oneself. Knowing that no one within his vicinity would willingly aid him, Roman would have to find some kind of sharp edge capable of cutting through the tightly wound threads. His thoughts were interrupted as Virgil swung the door open, a needle and thread in hand. This time, he took a seat on the floor opposite Roman. Needle placed within his fingers, Virgil took up the hem of his cloak and began to get to work. Roman observed curiously. "What are you doing?" Virgil glanced up, looking slightly irked by the disruption. "Fixing the hem of my cloak, which you managed to tear after pulling it last time." "It was justified as you were committing a crime," Roman groused, "and I don't see how you could be so upset when you're currently the one putting the kingdom in imminent danger." "I'm not the one who decided to kidnap you, Princey. I'm sure the Queen is fine ruling without you and your precious input." "That's what you think," Roman muttered. Virgil raised an eyebrow in response, but Roman didn't elaborate. Virgil eventually returned to his sewing, leaving Roman to, sit there, much to his discontent. He was not left to his lone thoughts for long, however, as the click of the door latch caused both him and Virgil to flinch. Janice strode in, and looking over to Virgil, Roman realized that they were both in the dark as to why the inventor had entered the room. That was never a good sign. Silently, Janice came to rest near the singular window in the room, tapping his fingers on the wooden sill. "I believe there is something I need from you, Roman," he said, turning to face the prince. "You already know my answer to that," Roman replied coldly. "If you're looking for secrets, then go find someone else." Janice chuckled softly. "Oh, darling, is that what you think this is all about?" He crossed the room, wandering through the space. "I do suppose you are partly right, but at this rate, I believe you need a little push before I can get what I want." "Nothing you do could ever make me concede to you." "Come on, Roman. I only have a simple request." Virgil glanced up at this, seemingly curious. Roman scowled. "No request from you could ever be so simple." "If you say so," Janice hummed, grinning. "Tell me the name of the palace messenger." "Never in a million millennia." "But, my dear prince, don't you want the people to know where you've gone? I'm sure your mother is worried sick." Roman's lips pressed into a thin line at the thought of his mother. "What are you implying?" "If you must ask, I will be informing the kingdom of your disappearance." Janice's answer was rather vague, though Roman was becoming too trapped in his own thoughts to notice. "No," Roman whispered. "I refuse." "Haven't you already done enough, Prince? You wouldn't want to keep them in the dark, panicked and distraught, would you?" Roman's shoulders slumped, his gaze trailing to the floor. Janice's smile only deepened. "You must know they miss you so. Imagine how much they must be working to find you. All that distress, all because of you." Roman's face fell. He tried to push Janice's word from his mind. "He's a liar. Roman couldn't trust a single thing he said, though the spirals of sentences wove around his head, trapping him in the very thing he was most afraid of. It really was all his fault, wasn't it? Janice couldn't have lied about that, not when everyone in the kingdom knew of how distraught the queen could get. His poor mother, and worse, Patton and Logan. They must all be fretting beyond belief. He hung his head, his voice shaking. Patton Oriole. Send your message to him, and the kingdom may be informed of my absence. Just, please, tell them I'm unharmed. That's all I ask. I can't bear causing them any more sorrow. That can be arranged, Janice drawled, spinning on his heel and giving a small nod to Virgil, who turned to leave as well. You've done well, Roman. Keep it that way. He shut the door, pushing the lock back into place. They entered the kitchen, where a cream envelope was lying on the table. Janice plucked an ink vessel from the nearby counter and scribbled Patton Oriole on the front. He gently blew on the ink, allowing it to dry before handing the envelope to Virgil. He curiously took the envelope in his hands, removing the letter and reading it for himself. To anyone who may see this, I have run away and I won't return for a very long time, possibly forever if I so decide. It is nothing of your concern. I simply can't stand to be around the unstable nature of our kingdom any longer. I have tried for weeks to show my discomfort, but no one seems to want to listen. Clearly, I am not needed. Please inform my mother and friends not to worry. There is just too much to explain and too little words. Do not come looking for me. I can assure you that I am unharmed and am in no need of your assistance. Sincerely, Roman. Virgil cocked his head. This isn't what happened. What are you doing? Only what is best for us, Janice grinned. I did say I would inform the kingdom of what happened, but I never specified I would be telling the truth. I even catered to his request and stated that he was unharmed. This way, we may shake them from our tale. That is incredibly cunning. Janice bowed, bringing a laugh from Virgil. Why, thank you, he said. Now, can I see to it that you slip this letter past the castle gates? Virgil's eyes widened. You let me? But what about all the guards? I thought about it, and I trust you, Virgil. Just please be cautious. Stay away from the public and return as soon as possible. Virgil clutched the letter in his hands. Thank you, Jan. Really, thank you so much. I believe it is what I owe you after leaving you to watch the prince. A genuine smile found its way onto Janice's lips, and he waved Virgil away. Now go, before I change my mind. Virgil slipped on his boots as fast as he possibly could, pulling the hood of his cloak over his face. He offered Janice a final smile, then rushed to the door, almost running into Remus, who had just arrived in the process. Be careful, Janice called behind him, to which he could faintly hear Virgil call back, You're such a dad. Janice chuckled, placing his hands on his hips. Remus strolled in, the day's stolen items hanging from his belt. Virg is right, you know, Remus snickered. What if instead of Janice, we called you Father Jan? Better yet, how about Daddy? No! Janice shouted, covering Remus's mouth before he could utter his next words. Under no circumstances will you call me anything other than Janice. He suddenly jerked his hand back, wiping it on his shirt as Remus dissolved into a fit of giggles. Did you just... Yep. Serves you right. No one shall silence me. Remus left to his room, still drawing out the me portion until the sound of a shutting door could be heard. The inventor sighed, pushing away the small burst of annoyance that emerged in his features. After all, there was too much to look forward to in the days that would follow, all starting with the cream envelope that found its way to a certain messenger's desk. This has been Chapter 8 of Set Him Free. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time for Chapter 9.